Greetings, everybody. We're going to take a few minutes so people can connect. So while we wait, let me just go over the notices. So this session will be recorded, is being recorded. If you have a chance, please type your name and your email and affiliation so we can keep track and reach out to you. If you're not speaking, please mute yourself. You don't want to add noise, especially with the internet connections. We will have a Q&A, question and answer session with Bill after he gives his presentation. We will be monitoring the chat, so you can ask questions there. And then we will call on some of you to present the question interactively. Gonna wait one more minute. People are still connecting. This is the definition of peace engineering that as a group we came up at the WEEF GDC 2018 first Global Peace Engineering Conference. Outcome of that was the creation of Peace Engineering Consortium, where Bill, Bernard Amadeo, and other people have created this consortium, and we're tackling and challenging. We need to change the mindset of everybody. It's changing the mindset, and this is exactly what Bill will be presenting today. A new way of thinking, a new way of not just doing engineering education, but in general, all disciplines need to change, and we will probably have to create new disciplines. The title of this talk is Community Engaged Learning, Integrating Peace Engineering into the Engineering Undergraduate Curricula. I have the pleasure of working with Bill. We have joint efforts between his university and my university, and also with ECHO. So we have students working hands-on on real life projects using the ECHO network. I'm the moderator. My name is Ramita Jordan. And next, I would like to introduce Professor William Oakes. Next slide. As I was saying, he's a good colleague. We have been working together in peace engineering, redefining curricula, undergrad, graduate, and projects. This is hands-on. This is community-based engagement. Bill, thank you so much for agreeing to give a presentation to our community. And I want to congratulate you for winning the 2020 GDC Diversity Award. Bill, the microphone is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to share. So Ramiro, can you see the slide?
Yes, yes.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. I'm very excited to do this. I see on a participant list some good friends and colleagues and some names I don't recognize. So this is, I'm very excited to be here. What I want to do is, as Ramiro said, to talk a little bit about a different way of doing engineering education, and quick about my background so you can put things in context. I'm a mechanical engineer by training. I'm now a professor. I say that because I'm a professor in engineering education, and with the community engagement work, we do all kinds of things. But I was a very happy design engineer with GE Aviation, doing the engine designs. It scares some of my friends that I tell them that they're actually parts that I helped design flying on aircraft. But one of the things I did when I was in industry is we worked with how do you onboard students, young professionals? And we talked a lot about there's got to be a better way to prepare students so that they can come into industry faster and more effectively. And so I decided to become a professor with the intent, in my view, of preparing students from industry. Now, when I joined the faculty in 1998, I was assigned to this class called Epics. And what Epics did is they worked on designs, and these are pictures of a automated sailboat, or a sailboat that can be sailed with an electronic system to allow a child with a disability to actually power the boat. And this is part of a camp, a summer camp for children with disabilities, so that the children with the disabilities could experience things that their peers that don't have the same disabilities would be able to do. And the thing that I realized is when I looked at the projects like this, and I will confess, when I got into this work, I said, wow, these are nice side type things, but I really wasn't thinking them as integrated into what I wanted to do to prepare an industry. And what I've seen firsthand and what we've seen in the research is these kinds of experiences can actually prepare students, give them the fundamental skills to go into industry. And one of the things that I believe in engineering education that we do, or a misconception that we have as faculty and administrators, is to prepare students for industry, they have to do something that looks like industry. But really what we're trying to do is provide the fundamental skills for them to take that on. So I share this because when I look at what I want to talk, part of what we look at is the education, preparing future leaders. The community engaged learning has the opportunity to also impact society. And very often we look at these two things as separate. But the community engaged learning, what it does is it says, look at society, look at the needs of society, and those become context in which we can engage students in projects. Now, I said I'm a professor in engineering education. I was one of the group that created Purdue School of Engineering Education. And the research and the scholarship that we do, it is in the education area. And one of the things that the research shows is if you look at what we do in the classes, and Ramiro mentioned we have to do things differently. If you go into a lot of lectures, you see things where students are sitting there, they're listening, and the data shows after just a couple of weeks, a lot of what we taught the students, they've forgotten. But if I look at something and I engage students in doing something authentic with that knowledge, I can take a retention rate that's somewhere between 10 and 30% and increase that to 90%. And I put this up front because one of the things that we think about is if we put projects in the curriculum, which is what I want to talk about, is what do we cut out? But what we're looking at is a curriculum that's not terribly efficient. And as engineers, I can look at things to make things more efficient. So these projects can serve to increase the content knowledge. Now, I run a program that is called EPICS. The logo stands for, or the acronym, Engineering Projects and Community Service. If you come to my campus, you will not see this. We've just used the term EPICS. And the reason is that EPICS is part of three big buckets: multidisciplinary design. And what I've learned at my university, if I ask people to say, do you want to be part of engineering projects? And they stop listening at that point. And so we said the EPICS project is multidisciplinary. Right before this, I was actually talking about our colleagues in business, of how to get more business students integrated into our teams. The community engagement is part of what we do, is can we add value to our community, not just use the community as a context, but the results of our design and our program end up in the community's hand. And the other big bucket is preparing students to be professionals. So as they learn to work with others, is they're working on a real project that has all the mess of the real world. The students end up coming out better prepared. I'll show you some research on that. So what we think about is this intersection is where that work can happen in the curriculum. And we've had a whole host of corporate partners that have liked what we've done and support us. So again, this connection with industry and the community engagement can be strong. I want to talk a little bit, well, I'll give you just a preview of our EPICS program. We have our courses at Purdue. We run about 1,100 students, I almost said 11,000, 1,100 students through our course. We're working on about 150 projects during the year. Each one of these projects is intended to be delivered to a community, and they range from, I'll give you some examples. We've been doing this for 25 years. We also work with a university consortium. So we work with other universities who would like to integrate these things. And one of my hopes is that this talk, you'll find it interesting and informative, but it would lead to new collaborations on ways that we can work with other universities or regions. We also work in the pre-university space, primarily in the United States for that. To give you some ideas of some of the projects that we work on, we talk about different areas of impact. So because we're multidisciplinary, we don't talk about the electrical projects and mechanical projects, but we look at things like access and abilities, working with adults and children with disabilities. So this can range from, in the bottom here is the camp for the children with disabilities. That's where the sailboat went, to communication technologies, to things like prosthetics. You know, if you look at children that need prosthetics, that need things that can grow and adapt, we also look at things like how do you employ adults with disabilities to give them opportunities. We work in the education area. We work with schools. Now, when I say education, I don't mean our students go and tell other people the exciting things that we're doing. That may be part of what we're doing, but if I look at like this bottom, this is a classroom in India that actually EPIC students from India hooked up a simple e-learning system that allowed the university to connect with the village to enhance the science education of the village. We're looking at mobile science labs that on the bottom right are pictures of Haiti. We're doing this also in India. Is if you're looking at science education in a rural area, the schools may not have the infrastructure, but can you make something that's mobile to do that? We work with NGOs and things that are actually looking at how the NGOs work with data and management systems, looking at food security, home, shelter areas, in the environment and sustainability. We work with some universities are actually looking at their own campuses. We do a lot with alternative power at my university. So what we try to do is to work with other organizations. And I saw Abby from EWB was on here, that in EPICS, we use the EPICS course structure to allow our students that are doing Engineers Without Borders projects and to gain credit for that. I mentioned the EPICS program, and I'll show some examples, but what we found is that each institution, we can take these principles, and if I look at what EPICS brings, or I could just say the community engagement, each institution has their own culture. Each region of the world has their own culture, but it even comes down to each institution. So something that we've worked with and we've learned to implement these things at a specific college or university requires discussion with administrators and faculty and how to work through these things on how they could fit into the local curriculum for that. I want to show you some data. I wouldn't be a good research professor if I didn't show some research results. One of the things we did is we asked, so if you remember this first slide that I talked about, I got into teaching so that we could prepare students for industry, and now I run our EPICS program. So do my worlds actually connect? And so what we did is we did a survey. We had 524 of our graduates that responded to a survey, and then we followed up and we did some interviews with 27 of the students. And what we found is if you look at the professional preparation, that we had over 3/4 of the students talked about the EPICS course. Now, the EPICS course is just one course that the students took, but they looked back and they said that one course had a significant impact on their professional competency and also in their perspectives of engineering. And it talked about their future community engagement also. On the interviews and in the surveys, what it showed is the students got involved in a project. And this was interesting I thought it was interesting that the students, when they were students, didn't think what they were doing was going to help prepare them for industry. But when they got out into the industry, what they realized is, ooh, I've seen something like this before. And I'll give you an example. In one of the interviews, one of the young women talked about that she had hired into a company and had risen up very quickly, faster than the peers. And that was common in our interviews, is our graduates reported that they felt they were being promoted faster than their peers. And she was working for a multinational company that had a very large customer, was not happy and was threatening to leave and to go to a competitor. And the company sent her to save the account. And this stressed her out. She was very stressed going to here because she said, I've never done anything like this. If I'm not successful, people are going to lose the jobs. And she said she got into the meeting and started talking, and she realized she got calmer because she said, I've done this before. When she was a student, their team was partnered with a school. And at one point, she was the leader, and the school was not happy with the team. And she had gone and talked to the administrator of the school, and the teacher found out why that they weren't happy, went back and they fixed things. And she's realized, I've done something like this before. And she ended up saving the account, but she said she wouldn't have made that connection with the school, but that's what we've seen. The students also talked about how this is a picture of a bridge, of how what they did became a bridge as a student. What they did as a student became a bridge to what they did later in industry. And they talked about the fact that they were in a safe environment and how, well, remember, these are graduates. I don't know how many of our students would describe our classroom as safe. But if you think of the graduates, they're out and they realize in a class, if I do something wrong, I might get a lower grade. But if I'm out in industry, I could get fired. So they had opportunities to make mistakes. There was some structure, but they were given freedom, and they understood it was it was education, but it was also like practice. So it simulated the things that they were doing to help prepare them. A lot of them talked about being promoted faster, not because they were smarter, but they made mistake. What they reported is they saw their peers making mistakes in industry that they'd made as a student. Now, one of the other things in data that I found was interesting is a lot of times we look at how students come from being a novice up to an expert. And we did a couple studies. One was on design, looking at design skills. The other one specifically was looking in the aerospace industry, was looking at how people handled complexity. And the interesting thing was we could plot the progress from novice to expert on a two-dimensional axis. One of the axes was the technical. The other axis ends up being interacting with people. So if you think of design, it kind of makes sense because I have to get an appreciation for people on the complexity. Once I get to a certain level of complexity, I can't do everything myself. I have to rely on other people. And so what happened was, if you look at the expert, people needed to increase their technical skills as well as the interacting. If you think of the traditional engineering curriculum, and when Ramiro says we need to think about different ways of creating programs, what we really do is emphasize the technical and push the people technically, and then say, okay, at some point you're going to get a job or something, you're going to learn how to work with people. And the problem with that is that people and engineers develop more at a diagonal. So what that says is there's a limit to how far I can push somebody technically if they're not learning how to deal with people. And what that says is students need experiences that integrate people and technology in engineering to develop that. And it's another opportunity for projects. Now, a concept I want to introduce with community engaged learning is to break the mindset that in a traditional class, we say, here's the opportunity in the calendar. The students are going to start with no knowledge. They're going to end with learning everything. And if I have a project, it's going to last magically that per complete semester. And if I engage students in real things, the thing that happens is the project might not get finished in that semester. Something happens, it's not quite ready. So what happens with that? In EPICS, we have students that come and go and they overlap. And that's kind of shown in the blue. So if a project needs to get finished, the students, as they're overlapping, one student may leave, the project's not done, they hand it off to the other students and they can leave. So in my program, I have 150 projects, and projects are starting and stopping in the middle of the semester, at the beginning of the semester, at the end of the semester. And this structure allows us to manage that. What that also allows us to do on the community side is it allows us to not engage with the community in terms of projects, but to move into partnerships. And what I mean by that is that camp with children with disabilities. We have worked with them for now, I think, at least 12 years. So we designed that sailboat. That sailboat's being used. We went back to the camp and we identified another project. What that also means is that sailboat needs servicing or maintenance. I have students working with that camp, and they can stop what they're doing and they can go over and they can provide some service and maintenance. So it adds value to the community. When we sign up for a partner, we agree to work with them for a minimum of 5 years. And I think it's interesting because there's groups like Engineers Without Borders that have found that 5-year commitment as a minimum commitment. It is a similar type of thing. Now, how would this fit in the curriculum? One of the ways to think about this is I have my regular curriculum and I put a course in here, and it could be a whole course or it could be maybe half a course where the students get on a design team and they work with it for 4 years. And one of the things this allows us to do is the older students become the leaders and they mentor. So if I had students working on a project for the community, at the end of those 4 years, when they're ready to go into industry, not only can they work on a technical team, but they can say, I can lead a technical team because I did that as a student. This longer term also allows students to make mistakes and to see the ramifications of those. Now, we've worked with institutions that might not be able to do this. And one of the things, this is an example in India where they looked at their course structure and say, maybe I can't make a 4-year thing, but I could make a 3-semester experience. What you see in these arrows are there's some different kinds of learning that the students would do as well as working on the project. And the 3-semester experience allows in semester 3 the students work with semester 1 students in a batch, in the next batch. And so there's a handoff of the project. So there are different ways to look at the structure. The key with this that we found, like how do you manage something like this, is we rely on the students. We create student leaders. Who needs to train the new students? The existing students. And what this does for me is if I look at my larger team, I would have a student who's a project manager. I would have different projects going on. Each one would have a design lead. And we tend to look at ourselves as the teacher, instructor on top here. But what we do is think of ourselves as advisors. So how do we come alongside the students and rely on the students to do a lot of things, but not out on their own? That we're here as an advisor to help mentor the students. And this has changed the mindset that we have. Now, if you think of students in a course, they still need to be graded. In my course, the students are working on the project. There are no exams, there are no tests. So how do we grade the students? What we think about first is how the students develop artifacts. Artifact is just something that I can grade. So we have them, they're things we can observe, their team. We also have them write things down. They keep notebooks, they keep design documents, both as a team and individual. So we have some things the team does, some things the individual does. We have them writing reflections each week and at the end. So there are many things that we can grade. And then we look at our grading. Remember I said one of the things we do is try to prepare students to be professionals. The way professionals are graded is through a performance appraisal. And we do a similar thing. We use a rubric, and this is probably too small, but the intent here, if you look at the big thing, what are our outcomes? We have 5 outcomes that we assess students on. They're accomplishing. What did you get done? They're utilizing the design process. My class is a design course. What is the evidence there? Reflective and critical thinking, teamwork or leadership, and communication. And so we describe how students can be excellent, proficient, competent. And what we ask here in this column on the right, the students fill this out. They do a self-assessment, and they tell us where is the evidence of that work. So they point me. Essentially what the students do is they create an organized portfolio, and we can assess that, and we can go into that. But we try to mirror a performance appraisal in industry. And that's what we try to do with that. And it's worked well. We have been through 4 ABET reviews with our program, our accreditation. And ABET has loved us. In fact, we've done workshops for ABET on how to assess these things. I think that there's opportunities for impact. Research shows that there's more learning actively engaging students and engaging students in authentic projects. There are opportunities for project-based learning that can engage people within the curriculum, and the community engagement has the opportunity to impact our communities. Our program has delivered over 400 projects to people locally and globally. They're tangibly people that have improved the quality of life based on the work that the students have done. There are models, there are successful models around the world that can be adapted to individual institutions. It does require some faculty development and some mentoring. Something that I'm excited about these networks is how can we develop global mentors for faculty who are interested in doing this. And I really believe, and one of the things I love about Ramiro and Donna and many of the other friends I see, Hans and Abby, is there are a lot of us that believe we can make the world a better place for everyone. And the way that we do that is we all find small ways that we can do that and start to grow the number of people that are doing this. I want to thank you. This is my email, and Ramiro and Donna have, and I wanted to make sure that I had time for questions. And this is one of the few presentations that I went under the time that I thought, but it leaves more time for dialogue.
Thank you, Bill.
Mhm.
Awesome presentation. Thank you. I'm going to open up for Q&A with our audience. Some questions have been typed in, but if anybody has a question, please raise your hand and you will be the owner of the microphone.
Christian Bolu had a question. Do you want to go ahead and ask that?
Thank you very much, Bill. Thank you so much for this. We are also thinking strongly, how do we bring in peace engineering into our curriculum? There's so much of war and trouble and hijacking and all kinds of bad news. And engineering is beginning to look as if it's you learn engineering to go and destroy. So this is an excellent presentation. What I'm very much interested in, I work a little bit with orphans. You know, I have an orphanage myself. And the fact that we need to get our problems, not necessarily something straight away an engineering problem, but for a community problem. And then you begin to insert engineering. Now, have you had experience on sourcing projects from Africa, particularly sub-Saharan Africa? If you have, I would like to get your experience on how you source them so that we can go and get it for our students in the university.
So let me make a comment on one of the questions you asked in preference to your last question. One of the things I believe when you're looking at getting peace engineering and these things in is to have a space where students can work on something that's within their capabilities as undergraduate students, and to have experience with something that's tangible. So when you look at these community things, you know, I think a trap we get into when we look at peace engineering is how do we handle, you know, these things that are beyond the scope of the people who may be running even the government. And then we go, how do the undergraduates can do that? And what you realize is, how do I look at increasing the peace? And when I think of peace, quality, you know, there are a lot of things that go quality of life for someone or a small group of people. And that part of doing that, I believe, starts to teach the students that we can be part of solutions. And there's a lot of things they can learn. So I think there's part of the peace engineering and the larger things that we can teach on a theoretical, or, you know, get them to think bigger. But it's also an important piece here. When you talk of solutions, and one of the things that we're working on with Ramiro is how do we make projects that have been developed for somebody in a region available to a larger group so that they could be adapted for student groups. And some of that is a database. We have in my specific program and at Purdue, we've done some projects in Africa. I don't think we haven't had what I would say is that big long-term success, because part of what we're not just trying to develop a project to meet a need that we can ship over, but how do we develop that partnership? And I think looking at that, we're very interested in looking at if there are institutions in your region, for example, that would be interested in doing something like this, could we look at Purdue or New Mexico students working together? Because it's very, it's also, a big problem with this work is there's so many needs. You know, I go to some of these conferences and people said, final year projects, I need ideas. I don't have that problem. There's so many needs here. There's so many needs globally is we have plenty of project ideas, but it's finding that right relationship where we can add value. So I think to follow up, what we're trying to do is to get more project ideas that students could work on. This is the database that we're working on with Ramiro.
Okay.
So there might be something like in your country that somebody's tried that we could then take our students and maybe we could improve something.
Okay.
But a big part of this larger learning is not just going, okay, students, I want you to work on this pump and develop this pump, but it's working with people they can get a meaningful interaction with, because a lot about peace, I believe, is humanizing others. There's we dehumanize other groups. And that empathy, that understanding, that appreciation for others, the respect for the other people, seeing them as partners. I think the students need a way where they can interact with the other people so they're not just theoretical. And so we try to balance where we're working with opportunities for students to do this. So we have projects within my own town, and we have projects in Asia, we have projects in Latin America, in the Caribbean. We do have two projects. We've got a project in Uganda and a project in Kenya in air quality. But each of those, it's looking for that relationship. So,
thank you, Bill. I'm gonna stop you here because we got lots of hands. Mindy, do you want to go next? Then we'll ask Allah and then Professor Rupesh Vasani. Mindy?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Thank you. This is wonderful. Let me say who I am first. I'm a sociologist and I'm vice president of an NGO called Global Peace Services USA. We have a wonderful website. We've been around since 1998. Look at our newsletters. My question, William, is I'm very excited about what you're doing. I'm wondering, in terms of some of the intellectual formation, are you working with faculty from other departments, from sociology, political science, even urban planning, to look at how the projects the students will do fit into a larger picture? You well indicate that the projects are small, they're doable, they're concrete, they're achievable. How can we help the students to see how this is part of a larger mosaic that ultimately can really shift things?
Mindy asked a great question. So EPIC started in 1995 before I got into it. In 1996, they brought their first sociology professor in to the collaboration. And we have had different people. But a challenge I have at my institutions, now we get into local politics and challenges, is how does somebody from liberal arts get teaching credit for engineering and who pays for that? And so we've had people from communication. We've got some great people in anthropology, education. Right on this, I was talking with some of the business people, but it's getting the resources to get the students. So it's a balance. So the answer, you're exactly right. We need more of that. What I think these projects do, and Christian, this comes back to one of my statements about your question. I think what we do is we look at these big collaborations and we try to figure out something that's big and complex. And if you go and you've got tangible projects, like the way we've got our anthropology partners is we've identified some places with value add. So we're working with them in Latin America, that they had a project that they were working on with indigenous people in the Amazon. and they needed some technical support because they were looking at a community center. And we were working in Colombia, and we're like, boy, we really need some anthropology connections to do some of the exact kind of things that you're talking about. So we blended that team. So that team works in Brazil and Colombia, and there's cross fertilization. So we continue to work, we continue to seek that. I mentioned that we don't use the acronym Engineering Projects Community Service. Part of that is to try to attract other people. We found design is a less threatening term than engineering. That's why we talk about that. If I'm being totally open and honest, and I don't see any of my administrators on here, so that's good, but it's tiring because the inertia of the institution wants to drive people back to their own departments. And so we continue to try to figure out how we bring people together. And I think some of these efforts are, and I believe these projects become things like, oh, I don't need a theoretical thing. We need some students on some of these projects. So we work on the projects, and then we try to get the students to think of the larger issues. That's part of the reflection process is to get them to think about that. You know, we don't get them to expert, but just to start to be aware that there are other people out there at a minimum. So I'd love to talk more on how we do that, but it's
Thank you. We'll continue the conversation.
sure. Romero, who is next?
Professor Williams, it's Rupesh Vasani
No,
from
Rupesh,
India.
please, the next person is Professor Allah.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
Let's follow the order. Allah,
Okay.
you're next.
That's okay, no problem, Ramiro. Thank you. Thanks, Bill, for an excellent presentation. I have two quick questions. One, have you thought about expanding the program beyond, if I understand correctly, it's one course? So expand it beyond this and...
Well, and maybe I should say our course, it's a series of course numbers. It's
Okay.
the only course at the university where it's a good thing if you take it multiple times. And I say
Okay.
that because if you're taking the first calculus course and said, I took calculus 1 8 times, that probably means you weren't successful, right?
Right.
But with our course, it's about the project. So students can take it multiple times.
Okay.
And we've worked with how students, this is another barrier, Mindy, like how does a liberal arts student get credit for our course? Is the students can count our credits for different things. So, and I showed that like vertical thread. We literally have students that'll take it from semester 1 all the way to their final year. Other students come and go.
Okay, and that takes me to the next question. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. The next question is how does it count? Does it count as a technical elective? Does it count as part of the liberal arts?
Right. So at my institution, each department curriculum committee defines how it counts. So I've spent 20 years going to curriculum committees going, hey, can this count? In engineering, it counts as a technical elective. In some of the engineering disciplines, you have to be a 3rd or 4th year student for it to count as a technical elective. My university has a requirement that you have to take a class in science, technology, and society. We count for that. Some of our first year students take our course as a substitute for the Introduction to Engineering course. And some of in liberal arts, they have an ethics and social responsibility list that they can take that. The entrepreneurship certificate, we count at that. So our students can count our course for different things. And what we've tried to do to allow students to take it for 4 years is, because we haven't changed the curriculum. When I showed that design thread, that's kind of my dream, is to have this to count for something in the core. But what we do is they count it for different things. Now at my university, our course counts as like half a course. So students need to take it for 2 semesters to get that technical elective. And so that means we have more students taking it for 2 or 3 semesters.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, Allah.
Who's the next?
Professor Rupesh Vasani, please.
Yes, Professor William, it was excellent. And it's a new, as far as the India is concerned. I think hardly anybody has heard of this thing, but due to GEDC, I'm well versed about this, your peace engineering, and even 2 years back also, we had a special theme on peace engineering. So my question is, ours is an affiliated with government university. We do have a projects like societal problems, so village or the rural area problems, and we do give the credits to the to the students. Unless and until they complete or submit the one project, they can't achieve the degree of convocation certificate. So it's a compulsory to submit the project of village study during their entire 4 year of taking any problem of any village with the solution. So how far it's similar with your this EPIC program, and how we can mold into the creditable, because it's a non-credit course. So how we can, irrespective of the, for example, civil engineering. So we are giving with the village survey, what are the problems, what are the road problems, like that. For electrical, what are the conditions of the electricity in the villages or the rural, like that. For communication, is there any communication tower or so? So like that, we are giving the problems to the students. Now, my question is how we can give to the creditable to the students this type of projects in connection with the Apex, because little bit is different in our projects and your EPIC project. So how we can bridge between these two courses such that it can be creditable?
So it's a great question. As I said, I think each institution has some little differences, but if I were to make generalities, when I've seen requirements like that, and I have to applaud you to have that requirement. When we've worked with other institutions that had similar project, I think the difference is the amount of mentoring and how things are structured and some of that learning. So some of the things that Mindy had talked about on connecting what we're doing to some of the society and a process. When we've linked with students that were doing a project outside of the curriculum in some other institutions, that the students on that other side didn't have as much support. They didn't necessarily have as much mentoring. If you have a requirement like that, I think a benefit of putting it in the curriculum is you can ask the students to do things like to complete reflections or some of the documentation, or as you move along, there's some guided learning that can take place. I would also want to know, just as an institution, how many resources did you put in for those projects? Right. And I think if it's in a curriculum, then it comes into a course that has to be put in. There are institutions that have put things outside the curriculum and given meaningful experiences. I think it sends unintended messages. Like if it's outside the curriculum, that says that these things aren't part of core engineering. And I think one of the things that we need to think about, so when Kristen, you started, you talk about peace engineering, to me, that's part of how engineering should be taught. And I think it gives credibility, and the question as far as, do we count this in our curriculum for what that would mean. So I think if I'm looking at moving from outside the curriculum to inside the curriculum, is what structures would I put along for the students to demonstrate specific outcomes, and how do I support that work on the faculty side?
Yeah, that is perfect. Shall I have
And can we have a lot of questions.
Okay, that's
I'd be
fine.
happy to follow up after.
Okay, yeah, fine.
Sorry, Professor Vasani, but Donna, there's some questions in the chat. Can you please bring them up?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. We have one from Hans Hoyer. His question is, what kind of critical feedback have you received from local NGOs and leaders? Have you had failures based on your feedback? And how do you listen to them?
How much time do we have? Yeah. So what we're doing is we're doing real things with real people. And so we've had, I mentioned that interview with the young woman. We had a school that was going to fire the team. Like, this is not working. Your students are not listening. And we go back. We've learned things like we sign a memorandum of understanding, an MOU at the beginning. And what we talk about is what they can expect from us and what we expect from them. How we got to that rigorous process is we had miscommunications and different things. We've learned to have conversations up front and identify what ingredients work with us. Like, we need to identify that there has to be somebody there that can meet with the students, that we're not just doing work as charity work, we're integrating it into the education. So there's got to be resources on their part, time that they can spend for those. But we've had things that have gone wrong. The vast majority of time we've been able to address those. There's sometimes we've just agreed that this doesn't work for us. Habitat for Humanity is a global NGO. My first meeting with them, the director was going to fire the team because the team had only focused on technology. That was 23 years ago. We're still working with them. We figured out and how to shift. So a lot of it is building relationships with people who are willing to work and when things go wrong. But yeah, it doesn't always work well, which makes it harder for the faculty because you don't know that this is going to be successful. And I would say for the administrators, this kind of work puts faculty in positions where things can go wrong. And with the students, so the students need to be assured that they can still be evaluated if things go wrong beyond their control. And the faculty also need that assurance is as long as we're making progress, but some things would go wrong. What's the next one?
The next question is from Serene Tekene. My question/discussion topic is how we can globally engage universities more effectively, like the grand challenges or the UN academic impact programs.
So is it within the context of those programs? Is that what the question was? So I think part of, if I go back, how we can engage more, I believe that it's creating collaborations and starting to build programs together and build regional models and resource pieces. I said that each institution, if you're going to put this in a curriculum, there's got to be work that's done at each institution on how it counts. The question about how this counts within the curriculum ends up is a different thing at each school. It involves the curriculum committees and getting buy-in at the institution. So if we start to work together to support us, what has worked well in the United States with a lot of people doing this is we have colleagues that we can call or email or text or face chat, whatever stuff that we're doing when something goes wrong. So when something goes wrong, I can reach out to colleagues. How did you handle this? And we start to get support groups. So I think and I also think it's leveraging other groups. As you said, there's the grand challenges, there's other stuff on how these efforts can fit where students can get recognition, where institutions can get recognition and those types of things.
Thank you, Bill. Really appreciate your answer. My connectivity is a bit flaky this morning, so I typed up my questions in the chat, but I really, really appreciate it. Hey, everyone from California.
Hello, greetings.
So Bill, there's one last question talking about ABET, and this is from Darlington Agholor. And the question is, at what stage did you bring them into the ethics project?
At what state to bring ABET in? Was that the question?
At what stage did you bring them into the EPIC project?
So from the beginning, we've looked at ABET outcomes and modeled what we're demonstrating how the students can achieve those outcomes. So we've modeled our assessment process, like I said, like a portfolio system that where the students, there's demonstration of students that can master specific things. When students have to meet course requirements like final year project that have specific ABET outcomes, that those students have a slightly different assessment process where they have to, I showed our 5 broad outcomes. Final year students have to identify specific outcomes in specific areas for that. So our intersection with ABET has been through the accreditation process. And then we've had side conversations. Yeah, there are people in ABET that have liked what we've done, and we've done some workshops over there. But the other way I can answer that is we bring some students in first year, and some students are involved in final year. And the assessments are a little different as far as what they have to demonstrate for their outcome, but the basic process is modeled after the outcomes-based assessment that ABET has. That's really the foundation.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much.
We're getting close to the end. Would you like to expand of what we're thinking using the peace engineering echo model so we can replicate?
Yeah, so what we've talked about when we're talking at the beginning, I said, if this is successful, is how can we, and Christian, I think, you talked about your region, can we identify places that are interested in doing this kind of work? So I'm interested in the curricular piece. How do you put these things from a project-based, engaging community projects in the curriculum? And could we work with colleagues using like the ECHO model? But what I believe is we need to work with, we've got several dozen institutions that are doing EPICS work or similar work, is to connect and get institutions in regions that do this well, that then can become a hub to help others work through how this could work in their region. In the process of doing that, you also have opportunities to connect globally. So when you asked about sub-Saharan Africa, at my institution, at Ramiro's institution, there's students that say, I'd love to do something in Africa. And I really believe the wrong way is you get students in Albuquerque or West Lafayette going, okay, here's what I think the people in the village need. It's very different of going, we've got people that we're working with, and so the students can look at multinational teams, but then they're also learning from each other, and there's that face to get things work. So as you create this network, you've got the opportunity for collaboration within the network too, without trying to create an organized structure. Right. So it's can we create an environment where people are doing similar things, and then can we look for opportunities to collaborate? But my strong interest is to identify who can be some of those regional champions that are interested in not only doing this well at their own institution, but would then say, what, we would be open if other people wanted to come to our institution and we could work with other faculty. That it's the train the trainer mindset, but I think we throw that out too easily. That when it's easy to do projects, when you're putting these things in and trying to change the curriculum in a way that the changes are going to stick, there's a lot of detailed work that needs to be done at the institution. I think it's the right work. It's not the most fun. I hate committee meetings. I hate faculty meetings. But what the research shows, if you bypass that, there's research that if you bypass the institutional structures, the change won't last. That I can get something that goes in pretty quickly, but it can go away just as quickly. But if I do the work to integrate it in, that work can stick.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everybody. We hit our time limit.
Awesome.
So the challenge is there. Let's create those hubs and let's start the collaboration. So thank you, Bill, once more. Great presentation. Thank you, everybody,
Great
for your
discussion, good questions, hard questions.
Right.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
for
much.
everybody for participating.
I hope it's warmer wherever you are than it is here for us right now.
Correct.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah, bye everyone. Bye.